Hello, this is Learning with Mark Warren, and today I'm doing a review on the Focusrite Scarlett 2i4 Generation 2. Today we're going to be doing a review on my Focusrite 2i4 Gen 2, as well as how to set it up in your DAW. Now the Focusrite Scarlett is a 2-in 4-output audio interface. This one is USB bus powered, which means you don't have to have an external power cord in order for it to work. Now, if you're new to computer audio or home recording, you may be asking, why do I need to get an audio interface or an external audio interface when my computer or laptop already has a sound card built into it? Well, if you're doing any recording, and especially with a MIDI keyboard, there's a thing called latency. And that's the delay of time that you hear from pressing the key on your music keyboard or your MIDI controller before you actually hear the sound. Now, your built-in audio interfaces or sound cards, they don't usually offer low latency, so therefore the delay period, the time it takes to hit that key before you hear the sound, is going to be a lot longer. You want to get an audio interface with the lowest latency possible, so there's almost no delay or virtually no delay from the time that you strike the note to hear it out of your sound card. And that's what an external audio interface is really all about. Now, I chose to go with the Focusrite 2i4 Gen 2. It has 2 inputs, 4 outputs. There's 2 XLR jacks on the front, but they also double as TRS jacks, so you can plug in your 1/4 inch guitar or bass, or 1/4 inch jack microphones. It does have your gain controls on the front dial. You can set it to either be line or instrument. And there is padding if you have a guitar that has too high of a signal, so you can pad it and bring down the actual decibels of that input. It does offer phantom power, so if you have a phantom powered mic, you can just turn that on. And there is also a playback or direct input monitoring switch on this. Basically what that does, if you're on playback, that will allow you to hear it directly as it is from your DAW. If you turn that knob to the input, it'll let you hear the input of the signal coming directly in from the unit without going to your DAW. So you actually get no latency that way at all if you're monitoring any recording that you're doing. There is a main monitor knob for your main speakers, and this also has a source switch, so you can either listen to whatever's coming out of output 1 and 2, your main outputs 1 and 2 through your headphones. There's also a 3/4, so you can hear what's coming out of output 3 and 4. And then of course you have your headphone volume. I'm going to spin this around and we'll take a look at the back side. Now on the back side of the unit, you've got your USB port, your MIDI input and output if you still use 5-pin DIN MIDI input and output plugs. Next to the MIDI ports you have your line outputs. So these are unbalanced RCA line outputs. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1 and 2 are your first stereo pair, 3 and 4 are your second stereo pair. And then you have your balanced TRS outputs, 1/4 inch jack outputs on the far right of the actual interface. So who is this interface good for? So this interface is really good for someone who's starting their own home studio, or maybe they want a portable audio interface so they can, travel with their laptop and, whatever DAW that they're using or whatever music program that they're using. Now, I personally got this to use with my Surface Pro 4. I use Ableton and Reason on my Surface Pro 4, and I wanted a small interface that also had 4 outputs. So I wanted a stereo pair of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. This allows me to pretty much be able to cue, like as if I'm DJing in Ableton Live, have that on output 3 and 4 so only I hear that. And then I can test and practice and, actually plug in speakers and have a signal going out of 1 and 2. So I actually get 2 separate audio signals on the 1 and 2, 3 and 4. I do recommend, if you're into any type of DJing or anything like that, you're going to at the minimum need a 2 input, 4 output audio interface. Don't go with a 1 and 2, because then you're going to think, oh, I need to be able to hear stuff in my headphones while the crowd is hearing something else. Well, if you have a 2 in, 2 out audio interface, it's not going to work for you, because that's only going to have your stereo out and not an additional headphone or cue output that you can listen to on headphones. So of course my interface is already unboxed and I've loaded it on my computer and used it several times. But if you're setting yours up for the first time, before you do anything, before you plug it into the computer or try to install it, be sure to download and install the drivers first. So just simply go to Focusrite's website, go to the downloads, you're going to come down to Scarlett USB audio interfaces and download the latest driver, and in this case mine's the 2i4 second generation. There it'll take you to the page as to which driver that you need to download. Now I do recommend going in and checking periodically to see if there's an updated driver. This is usually to fix any bug issues or anything like that and reinstall the new one. Now this unit does also have the capability to update the firmware, so when you install the driver it also installs a firmware updater as well. So if you install it on your computer and go to Scarlett 2nd Gen Firmware Updater, that's the name of the app that it will look for. Now right now I don't have mine connected to the computer, but I'll do that in just a second. So install the driver first before you plug it in. At least make sure that's installed. And then once you're ready, just pretty much insert your USB cable and you're ready to go. If you're on Windows or Mac, it should automatically detect your audio interface, install the driver for it that you just installed, or at least make sure everything's all connected together, and then you'll be ready to go. One of the first things I would recommend is check to see if you have any firmware updates. So I've got mine plugged in, and actually as you can see here it does have an updated firmware available. So I'm going to go ahead and update that to the newest one real quick while we're at it. Alright, so that went pretty quick and my interface is installed and ready to go. If you're on Windows, you want to make sure it's the default sound device, so you can just click on your speaker icon and then select Focusrite USB as the USB device. If you're using headphones, just plug it in and make sure your source is set to 1 and 2. If you're going to use external speakers, just plug those into the back of the unit. So right now I'm just going to plug in some external speakers. Now after you have your speakers plugged in, you can test it just by clicking on the little speaker icon and clicking the sound, and you should hear that coming out of your computer. So now you're ready to go. So I'm going to show you how to set up the audio interface in two different programs. I'm going to use Propellerhead Reason and Ableton Live, and they both pretty much work very similarly to each other. So first I'm going to pull up Reason. And this is Reason version 10.0, but pretty much they work the same for all of the versions of Reason, I believe since about 6, actually probably even longer than that. So I've got to open a document, just a blank document. You can come into Preferences, Audio. You're going to set your audio interface to ASIO. Now, they do have a MME, usually Focusrite also as well. Here it is. Now, that will not give you the low latency. You want to make sure you're using the ASIO in order to get the lowest latency possible. Sample rate, you can set that to the sample rate of your choosing, and then set your buffer size. Now, the smaller your buffer size, the more processor power it's going to take, but it also gives you the lowest latency possible. So a good ideal sample size would probably be about 128 for most computers. Sometimes if you're getting clicking or popping, you might want to bump that up to about 256, but typically I know on my computer 128 does fine. That gives me a 7 millisecond latency input and output, so it keeps it really low. By default, your active input channels, so 2 out of 2 will always be enabled, and then you have the active output channels that you can enable individually. Either you can just have outputs 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, turn them both off so that you don't have any output, but of course who would want to do that? And then you're ready to go. Now if you click on the control panel button, that will bring up the ASIO control panel applet that is part of the Focusrite driver. There you can also set the sample rate and buffer size, but it's all done here within reason, so that's really not necessary. And there you have it. That's pretty much it. That's how easy it is to set up your audio interface. Now if you want to pull up a demo song, you can open up any demo song or whatever. I'm just going to use Airplane, which is the default one for Reason 10. And go ahead and click play, and you should start hearing everything out of your interface. And there it is. Now let's see what it's like to set it up in Ableton Live. So I'm actually going to open up Live 10 Beta. So Ableton Live 10 is now out in beta. If you already have Live and you have, I believe it's Standard or the Suite Edition, you can qualify to actually download and play with the beta. So just that word of advice, if anybody else there wants to try Live before it's officially released. So in Live, I'm going to go into Options, Preferences, and go to Audio. And again, I want to select the same thing. ASIO is the driver type, ASIO, and then Focusrite USB. So here you have the option to configure your input configurations. So if I actually wanted to name the input, so I know it's like maybe for guitar 1, and then the second input would be guitar 2, or we'll just say bass. And then you have your stereo inputs. If you had a stereo mic or something like that, you could name that there. But I'm just going to click OK for that. And actually on the input config, since I'm not using stereo inputs, I'll just make it mono inputs 1 and 2. Output configuration, you can name those as well. You have mono outputs and stereo outputs. So in Live 10, you can name it. So I'm going to say main output, and we'll call this Q output if you're doing DJ sets or something like that and you need to hear things in your external headphone. And again, you have the input, output, or the in-out sampling rate that you can set, and then you want high quality pitch conversion. You also have the option for setting the sample size. Now, it's a little bit different in here because they don't actually allow you to change it within Ableton, the sample size, but you can click the hardware setup button and then make sure the buffer size matches as what's on the control panel. Once you change it in here, it automatically updates in Ableton Live. So I'm just going to put this back to 128. There you go. And that's pretty much it for Ableton as far as setting it up. Now, if you do want to take advantage of using that Q output on outputs 3 and 4, and let's say you wanted to hear your DJ mix in there, you can pretty much have your headphones installed and flip the source switch so it's going to listen to what's coming out of outputs 3 and 4. And then of course you have your main outputs of 1 and 2. That's what's going to come out the back speakers there. So DJ hears one thing and you hear the other thing. You can also change your outputs in Live. So for instance, if I had audio coming out of this track, audio from, that'll be wherever it's coming from, and then where do you want to send it to? Maybe I want to send it to external out 3-4Q output. So maybe this is what I want to preview in here. This is what's actually playing. So pretty simple and easy to configure. And again, if you want to test a demo of Ableton Live, bring up the help page, go into what's new in Live, and then open up the default Live set. I'm not going to save this right now because I don't need to. It's going to reopen up the default Live set, and we can play that. you go. That is the Focusrite 2i4 Gen 2. For me, it's the perfect interface when I want to travel with my Surface Pro 4 and, you know, my little Korg Nano Key keyboard, still be able to write, compose, do everything that I want to do on it, and not have to worry about moving it back and forth between my regular desk and what I travel with. Now, if you are looking for more of an interface, and you want something that's a little more stationary and also have some upgrading capability, next week I'll be doing a review on the 18i8, which is the bigger brother of the 2i4. So I also have that one as well. I guess you could say it's the bigger brother or bigger sister since its name's Scarlett. The only negative I really found about this interface is the fact that, you know, they did this nice lettering on top of the Focusrite interface, and granted, I haven't really mistreated or abused mine very much at all. I mean, it goes into a soft bag, and just from, I guess, the little bit of wear of pulling it in and out of the bag, you know, I usually don't put much on top of this one, this particular one. Sometimes I have my my power block from my Surface, which has actual foam pad on the bottom of it, but you can see here a little bit on the top, you might be able to see it in the video, that the lettering is actually starting to etch out up there, or it's starting to get a little scratched out. So to me, it's like they didn't do a good job with whatever decaling that they had for that. Maybe put some type of finish over top of it so it didn't get scratched up like that. Personally, I could go without having the name on the top at all and just keep it as the red color that Focusrite is known for. That's the only negative I really have to say about this audio interface. It's clean outputs, inputs, and outputs, and it gets the job done. That's my little review on that. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have any questions about it, be sure to throw them down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you can keep up with my latest video postings. This is Learning with Mark Warren, and we'll catch you on the next one.